everyone, and welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And yes, I am going hatless for this episode. It's a warm day out here in California, so you will have to forgive me for that. But my guest today is a first timer here on the channel. She got her Ph.D. in history from the University of South Florida, where she taught global history since 1750 for 5 semesters. She moved to Germany and has worked in travel and lifestyle journalism for over 2 years, where she has utilized the research and writing skills she cultivated when working on her degree. She has written book reviews for the University of Marine Corps History, H-War, Women of Judaism, and H-Empire. She's also currently a book reviewer editor for H-Albion, HNet's network for the history of Britain and Ireland. Apologies. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to first timer here on the channel, Dr. Tamala Malerk. Dr. Tamala, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Awesome. So before we dive into your background, is there anything else you would like to share, little tidbits for our viewers?
Nothing I can think of right off the top of the bat. So let's just dig in.
All right. So let's start at the beginning. Were you always interested in history growing up, or did that come later in life?
So this is going to sound so superficial, but I actually got interested in history by watching The Tudors when I was in high school.
Really? Okay.
Yep. It's the only reason I took AP European history. And then I learned that everything on that show was pretty much wrong.
Nice. So from that moment and then getting your degrees, what sort of pursued you to get your doctorates in history?
So this is also less superficial, but it does trail back to high school. A group of friends and I were sitting in AP European history, and we all just decided that we were going to open up our own college one day. And I was going to teach European history. My friend next to me was going to teach US history. The girl that sat in front of her was going to be the theater professor. And we just kind of all sat around and said, hey, one day we're going to open up college, but you need a PhD to be a professor. So
Wow.
Eventually went down that path.
Dang. Well, that's still a huge achievement nonetheless. Apologies. So after that, of course, in your bio, it says you moved to Germany, and we've also now specialized in travel journalism and stuff like that. So how did that writing sort of like change and sort of like come about? Because I know from an academic point of view, your writing has to be this. When writing for a magazine, it's a little bit different.
So I move around a lot because of my husband's job, and we moved to Germany, and there are really, as you can imagine, not too many opportunities. And I have been a freelance writer since 2016, and just the opportunity to work in travel and lifestyle came up. And I remember in my job interview, I had I hadn't quite graduated yet. I was about a month from officially graduating, but I was all but graduated. I had defended my dissertation and everything. And my now boss was looking at, my resume and stuff. And she's just like, oh yeah, I see where you've written for this. And I'd written for a couple of blogs, a couple of magazines, things like that. And she's like, oh yeah, and you got a PhD, or about to have a PhD. And I'm like, yeah, I promise it is super relevant. And it's like you said, yeah, the skills of, writing for an academic audience versus writing for, travel, leisure, lifestyle, on the surface are super different, but I spend most of my days researching,
Mm-hmm.
Making sure I am properly citing wherever I get my information from. And of course, writing, which any person in graduate school knows that it's reading, writing, and editing and rewriting.
Yes, don't we know it? It's not easy. It's long hours, a lot of tired nights, tireless nights. Let me just say that, and stress. But it does have its merits at the end. We grow in our field that we love, and we learn new things in our field that we didn't already know. So let's actually talk about your field of specialty. Now, out of all the histories that I'm sure you were presented during your academics, what was the one that really said to you, you should study this? And he said, yes, this is the history that I'm interested in learning about.
So, um, again, going back to the Tudors, I just became obsessed with King Henry VIII's wives. I thought like fascinating story. And I just throughout high school, college, I even did my master's thesis on his sixth wife, Catherine Parr. And
Mm,
so when I started my PhD program, I had a clear set goal. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my master's thesis and I'm going to turn it into my dissertation. And I'm going to write this amazing biography of Catherine Parr. And Alison Weir, who is a very famous Tudor historian, beat me to the punch.
oh no.
And I love her work. As you know, a fan of Tudor history, I've read her work for years. So, I couldn't be too upset. But I was finished with my first semester of my PhD program. And I'm like, okay, well, what now? And during that first semester, I had taken a British Empire course.
Okay.
And I had, like for many classes, you have to write a paper at the end. And I had written my paper on Mira Ben,
Mm,
aka Madeline Slade. And she was one of Gandhi's English followers. And I remember coming back for my second semester. I really just like didn't have any like insight. And I walked up to the professor of the course. He had given me great feedback on the paper. And I was like, how do you feel about taking me on as one of your advisees and turning this dissertation into a 200 page or this paper into a 200-page dissertation? And I jumped 500 years in history, and now my what started off as like a specialty in early modern Europe, my specialties are now modern Europe, uh, women and gender, British imperialism, and American public history.
wow. That is quite a jump, but it is really nice. Those areas, in my opinion, don't get a lot of scholarship, which I always feel is very, very important because there are fields in history that don't get a lot of scholarship. So for you now, going back to, of course, also in your bio, you're also a book reviewer for a lot of other organizations, and I'm sort of wondering, um, when you become a book reviewer for these different companies and organizations, what is sort of like your promise to them and your promise to yourself when you read a book that is either A, not in a history that you're well astute in, or on a topic that's not really comfortable for you?
Well, thankfully, you don't run into that too much. So the reason that I got into book reviewing is I started when I was working on my PhD, and it just became like this like thing that was recommended to us because like it will look good on your CV. And working in travel and lifestyle journalism is great, but it's not exactly like staying in the field. And so I just kept writing book reviews for these different places because like I always want to like keep one foot in the history door.
Right.
Um, and so I'm always looking for, call outs or announcements or anything. And the nifty thing about that is, um, usually there's a list and you can peruse the list and you can pick something that is, in your field and in your specialty. So I've like definitely like danced around things that I might not be like super, super knowledgeable about, but I do have a more or less surface understanding. I just did something about post World War II France.
Ooh.
And yeah, as said, like I do technically, specialize in modern Europe, but it was incredibly educating to read what turned out to be a 600-page textbook um, about this subject, which covers like 15 years
Mm-hmm.
in French history. And as I said, I had, surface understandings and things like that. But I now know so much more about this very niche topic of, post World War II French and European history, and semi-American history, because it was about, the Americans leaving France post World War II. Um, so yeah, that would be my thing there is when something is, unfamiliar. I don't know if uncomfortable is the word. Like I cherish like getting to know more. And one of the things that I can say about like maybe something that did, again, I hate to use the term uncomfortable, but I once reviewed a book about Jewish women and their treatment in the concentration camps.
Mm.
That was some heavy, heavy like material. And
Right.
I found myself like I could read probably 10 pages or so, put it down, walk away. Like, because you're reading personal accounts, you're reading like just these very intimate, horrific stories that you just kind of have to sit with. And so this wasn't a book that I was just able to like very quickly, breeze through and talk, write about. It
Right.
took some time to do this review because I took some time to read the book.
Mm. Now, what was the initial reaction to, the first book review from these different organizations? Were they positive? Were they mixed? What was the initial feedback like?
So my goodness, the first book review I did, thankfully people are very, from what I can tell, or from what I've experienced, are very forgiving. And I had a really awesome advisor and very like supportive professors who like encouraged us to do these book reviews. So the organization had made like we're looking for book reviewers, and I threw my name in the hat, got selected, wrote the book review, and then I actually sent it to one of my professors because I was just so nervous. I'm like imposter syndrome, like they're gonna figure out like I don't belong here. I don't deserve to review anything. Like, and I'm like, my professor's gonna read this. Not only is he gonna tell me that it's not good enough to be book review, like he's gonna, kick me out of the PhD program. Because, that's just, and I think we all kind of face that as graduate students, like that feeling that like everyone around you is so smart and you're smart too. You would not be smart if you you would not be in the room if you weren't smart and you didn't deserve to be there.
Right.
And thankfully my professor, he gave me like some really good critiques, and he also kind of showed me not necessarily like a standard for book reviews, but he really showed me how to like say what needs to be said concisely, get the point out,
Right.
and so when I had sent it off to the organization, they did not rip it to shreds,
Well, that's good.
um, which was I was very, very grateful for that. And it got published. I've only experienced one time where the organization and I just went back and forth, and it was because I was attempting to write for a literary journal instead of a
Mm.
history journal. And I just remember going back and forth with my best friend, and I'm just like, I don't know what they want, because like I wrote a book review, and apparently I'm not writing a literary book review. I'm writing a history book review.
Mm.
And that was humbling, definitely, because I had a few reviews under my belt at that point, and I was just like, I've got this, and I'm like, got this. Like we just kept going back and forth, and finally they're just like, you know what, we're good. And I was like, oh, okay.
No, that's all very, very true. And you actually touched on something that we're actually going to go into right now, which is, as you coach said, imposter syndrome, anxiety, especially for beginning historians. So for you, Tamla, I would definitely imagine in your field and also doing numerous book reviews since that first one, there is still this sense of anxiety because you don't know if it's going to be really well, if it's actually going to really accurately depict the book that you're reviewing, and then you're posting it there, and how are people going to react to this review and stuff like that. There's that build of that tension that affects us all. So for you, have you ever had those thoughts of imposter syndrome and anxiety? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to not only do amazing book reviews, but also show I can do the work. I know my history. I know what I'm doing.
I mean, definitely, especially first starting out in graduate school, becoming all but dissertation, and being thrown a class of my own, like that happens, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
And every time like you hit that new milestone, you're it's new, it's what am I doing here? Can I do this? And you can. Like, I'm here to say you can. Like, nobody's going to put you in a position where you can't. And lately, what I've definitely been feeling imposter syndrome with is after 2 years of swearing up and down that I was never going to look at my dissertation again. I've decided that maybe it's time to revisit it and maybe begin the process of like attempting to turn it into a book.
Mm.
And that is every anxiety, every imposter syndrome feeling, like it just all like comes back, and new ones have appeared. Like, well, I've been out of the field for 2 years now. Has the field completely changed? I haven't, you know, been reading 10 books a semester related to my topic because they haven't been assigned to me. And um, so that's been fun. Um, and I guess like what I would say to like anybody like feeling those feelings is like not necessarily like, oh, just get over them, because like I mean we wouldn't have those feelings if we could just say that. But um definitely just like know that you can. And it's okay to fail. Like as I said, I had a book review come back to me, and they've literally like just told me no, and the
Mm-hmm.
world didn't end. I have published several book reviews since then. I just now know that I'm not a literary book reviewer. And I would just say like, you know, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Because like I think that's how you grow, and it's horrible because like, and I would definitely say to anybody, like if you're in graduate school, there's an implication that you're used to doing well in school.
Right.
And and I know like growing up I was used to doing well in school, and so when you start to receive those criticisms and those feedbacks, that can definitely add to that anxiety. And you kind of just have to like not take it personal, and you just have to grow from it, and you have to like kind of take your licks and just keep going. And that is so much harder. I was actually one of my friends is still, actually I have several friends still working on their PhD, but I was talking to one the other day, and she just got back one of her dissertation chapters from her advisor, and he had some things to say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just like brought me back to when I had completed my dissertation in its first draft. It was 260 some pages. And I was like, happy birthday to me. Here's my first draft of my dissertation. Enjoy its advisors. And my mate advisor was like, it's as if like you've never done citations before. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh.
And he was a lot nicer about it, but that
Mm.
was the implication that like I got from that. And I was just like, huh, well, yeah, my citations could have been much, and they could have been. Like, I was definitely, especially towards the end there, I'm just like, I just want to get this draft done. Da, 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 da. And, you know, I just kind of had to, I sat with it for like a day. I'm like, I'm never going to graduate. I should set this dissertation on fire and walk away now. And, you know, I wallowed for a day. And then the next day, just started fixing my citations and fixing all the notes and fixing. It's like we were talking about earlier, you know, writing is writing and editing and rewriting and
Mm-hmm.
more writing.
Yes, that is true. So now that you talk about the business side of being a historian, because I'm always interested to hear other people's viewpoints on these next set of questions. So let's dial it back, Tamala, to where you just got your doctorate. You've now just finished your PhD program. You're now out of the academic world and into the professional world. You have all the knowledge. Now you just need to apply it. So, did you think of possibly being a independent historian or a freelance historian, providing your insight into other topics for organizations, or did you want to try your hand at being like a public historian or an historian working in the government or some other governmental job?
Oh, definitely. Like that was one of the things that I really wanted to get into was being a historian or working at a museum or, you know, all of the above that you mentioned. Um, but we had already moved to Germany by this point. And I don't speak a lot of German, and I'm not going to here. And I surely don't speak enough German to work in the German economy at one of these places. So my I knew when I graduated that this wasn't going to be something that I would get to do immediately, which is also why I tried to keep that focus on like volunteering in the field and just keeping that like foot in the door, because eventually, you know, we are going to move back to the States, and I do want to say like, hey, I've stayed in the field, and um you know, I'm still a valuable asset to the history community.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like getting, you know, my job, which is again, it's very tangential to history. But you don't put footnotes in a travel article, which is the first thing I learned when I submitted my
Mm.
first, like, here's a travel article. And I just remember my editor like, well, yes, we cite, but you don't put footnotes in a travel article. And that was another like aha moment
Mm.
of okay, so I take these research skills, I take these writing skills, I take these editing skills, but I need to rewire them to learn, you know, how does it work in this field. I had spent my entire college career in the Chicago style, and now I'm like working with AP style and have been for
Mm.
2 years. And they don't believe in the Oxford comma, and it makes me sad to this day.
Oh, yes. And people who don't know what we're talking about, it's a huge, huge thing between like Chicago style, MLA, APA. It's just a lot. It's a lot. That could be a whole discussion. But you know what? It is ultimately true, especially for beginning historians. We all want the higher tier jobs like working in the government, working in museums, or some form of government institution. But that comes with a lot of skills and experiences, and sometimes you have to start at the bottom to get to the top. So now let's actually go back to your book reviews as well as your travel articles. Now, both definitely have an audience in mind when you're writing for both. And I'm curious, when you're writing for your travel article as well as your book reviews, do you have an idea of the audience in mind, or do you not consider the audience until the very end?
Oh, I definitely have to keep the audience in mind with both of these things. With travel, we think about, especially where I work, we try to gear things towards not just families or not just couples or not just single people. We try
Mm.
to create articles that are versatile enough to appeal, like, hey, there's something for everybody. Or we kind of flip it and do the inverse, where we're like, 5 kids or 5 places to take your kids on, the Deutschbahn tickets.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
so, and then the same thing with book reviews. And one of the things that like I was first taught when writing a book review is you want to make your review accessible for everyone. But I always note at the bottom that, like, this book is probably like best for insert target audience here. Like when I was talking
Right.
about that post World War II France book, yes, technically anybody could pick it up and read it, but it is best geared towards military historians or, people with an interest in World War II history, military history, some European history. But like there's an audience for this book. And anybody could pick up my book review and read it to get the gist of the book. But I don't know if everybody's going to want to pick up this, giant tome on post World War II France.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So now to go on to the next question, which is sort of like the inspiration behind your voice as not only a writer but also an historian. And for us historians, we're always molded by the people who taught us, professors, uh, past historians whose work we've enjoyed so much, and how they present history can, in a way, affect how we present history in terms of our writing, presentation, and other skills. So for you, Tamala, who would you say are the historians that have sort of helped you hone your voice as a fellow historian when crafting your book reviews and your travel articles?
Well, I don't know if like honing my voice is the best way to describe it. I can definitely say, like, these are like the people who inspired me to like
Okay.
be history. And I was inspired by their voices. So I
Okay.
think as I said, I've already touched on Alison Weir. Like, never met her, but like love her work. Big fan. Um, and so I was in my second semester of college, give or take, as an undergrad, first or second semester. And I was like bouncing back and forth. I was like, do I want to major in history? Do I want to major in literature? History, literature,
Mm,
history, literature. Those usually go hand in hand. And I don't know why the idea of double majoring just never like came to me. I thought it was
right.
an either or thing. And a lot of historians have a love of reading and a love of, writing. And so the two, as I said, like the two subjects definitely go hand in hand. But as I said, I was just going back and forth, which one do I want to do? And I had this professor, Dr. Ball. Um, he gave a lecture uh, about honor in ancient Greece.
Ooh, okay.
And the way that he delivered this lecture was just so phenomenal. It floored me. And I was like, oh, that's it. I'm a history major. Like, one good lecture. And I was like, okay, that's it. This is my chosen field. Um, So never doubt the power of a good lecture.
Right.
I know that with pedagogy and teaching, like we're getting away from like the long-winded lectures. But when it's a good lecture, like I don't mind when it goes on.
Right.
Um, so yeah, definitely. Dr. Ball was, the reason I am a historian today. And definitely just so many professors in my PhD program and in my master's program that like they just kept fueling that, fire. And when I was an undergrad, um, I had this professor who taught U.S. and Florida history, and I was in like
Mm.
I was one of those like I took American history in high school and middle school. Like I've taken all the U.S. history I'll ever need ever, but graduation requirement I had to have one U.S. history like class on record. So like I begrudgingly signed up for a U.S. Post 1945, and this professor, when we were writing, our end of term papers, he was just like, I'm going to pick 4 of you, and the best 4 papers from this like class are going to represent us at the Florida Conference of Historians.
Ooh, okay.
And I'm just like, what? Okay. And I just, as I said, as someone who like I was just like European history all the way, global history all the
Mhm.
way. Like I was like, there's no way. And like I'm sure you can guess how this ends. Like I got to like go. Like I was one of the 4 picked. And yes, Dr. Denham took just like a group of us wide-eyed senior historians who had just done their first like archival research for this paper. Like he took us to the archives to like show us how to do archival work. And I got to present at my first conference as an undergrad. So like Dr. Denham was like so vital to like my like I'm gonna go to graduate school and I'm gonna like keep doing this. So yeah, as I said, as far as like developing a voice, I don't know. Like I would assume that subconsciously,
Mhm.
all of everybody that I've ever interacted with or have read their writing or have listened to them speak has helped me form my like the amalgamation that is my voice as a writer and historian. But like I don't know to say like that's the one.
Right. But that is an incredible accomplishment. Another incredible accomplishment that you got to have. I mean, that I can't even imagine something like that, like presenting at a conference with all the senior historians in the state of Florida. I mean, that is crazy to me. If that would be crazy for like anyone in their home state presenting a
Oh my god.
conference of historians, there be amazing, but also a little intimidating, as we talked about before, that sense of anxiety, which now kind of leads into the next question. It's kind of like the audience one, but it's a little bit different, which is the readership. Now, for both travel and book reviews, the readership is always going to be different. Yes, the review or travel could be targeted to a mass audience, but ultimately it's whoever reads it and who reads it the most. So for you, Tamla, do you have a good idea of who your readers are from the reviews of travel articles and your book reviews?
So it's a little easier with like my day job because like I have behind the scenes access to like our
Ooh, okay.
analytics and things like that. I mean, I can't see like who is this, each individual reader, but we do like we have a target audience, we have a demographic, we like our work is on US military installations throughout Germany and Europe. So like I know who's picking up these magazines or who's reading our online articles. as far as like my academic work, I have no idea. I know with my dissertation, I can see how many people have downloaded it, but
Mm,
I don't necessarily like know. I don't know who they are, where they're at. I know that because of the subjects of my dissertation, and I've had a couple people reach out to me on LinkedIn or on my old academic email address. They were from India. So like I know I do well in India
right.
with my topic, and that's usually probably because my subject is not like solely Gandhi, but she was a follower of Gandhi. So when like my dissertation probably pops up when you know 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10,000 Google pages into like
Right.
Gandhi.
Nice. So now speaking of LinkedIn, let's actually talk about connections and networking, because I definitely feel that is huge for independent and freelance historians. And it's one thing that's never really taught about in school. Like, how do you network in the public or private sector to really make those connections? So, for you, Tamala, what was networking like right after, graduate school, getting your PhD, and can you name some people who have really helped you get a better idea of the field and the industry and the business of history?
So I this actually came up like while I was working on my PhD. Um, One of the classes that you have to take before you are all but dissertation is like a capstone course.
Right.
And um, I remember asking the professor, I was like, okay, looking at the field right now, I'm not going to graduate and go off and get to be a tenured professor. Like that's
Right.
just the reality. Um, and I know how to like go and apply for these tenured professor positions and the academic wikis and stuff like that. But for the reality, like
Right.
how do I network and how do I like do you recommend academic Twitter? Do you recommend LinkedIn? Do you recommend and he was super cool and he was super honest and he was just like, I don't know because he had been a professor for probably a decade or more at this point. So he's just like, I'm just one of like the people like I did what the traditional path is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like made it like part of my mission or goals like while I was in the department to like okay, well, what can we do to like learn more about like what we can do outside of the traditional path of what someone thinks when you get your master's or get your PhD.
Right.
And it's terrifying because even when you get a bachelor's in history, the assumption is you're going to teach high school history or middle school history, which I did. I actually did right after I got my bachelor's. And between my bachelor's and my starting my master's, I taught high school history, and it was fun. And I have that experience, but like nobody told me even then that like you can transfer those skills to a government job, to like a lot of places want those soft skills. And so like going back to like, okay, I've got a PhD. What do I do now?
Right.
And that was just I learned so much during my time like as a PhD student, and like starting off like, okay, what else is there out there? And there's so much more out there for like independent historians.
Yeah.
There is like doing what you do with your YouTube shows and your newsletters. There are people who podcast.
Mm-hmm.
There are did you know that JSTOR, which for those listening who don't know is like a I don't know, academic database. I don't know if that would
Yes,
be the best
probably one of
word
the
for it.
largest.
Yeah, like one of the largest, if not the largest. They have this thing called JSTOR Daily, which, yeah, I was the first to I just learned about it a couple years ago myself, and it's literally like this just like snapshot of like history facts, just cool little mini articles, and that's run by like an independent historian. Like she was a professor and now she does JSTOR Daily. And one of my one of my professors at my university just like knew her as a friend, and she's like, hey, come talk to my students about doing something other than being a professor. And I was like super interested. And I remember reaching out to the woman after she had done her talk, and she was like, and it threw me because she was like, oh yeah, DM me on Twitter. And I was like, okay. And I had never done that. Like I had never like had a conversation with somebody where it's like, oh, is this where the discourse is happening now? Is Twitter, well, now it's X, but
Right.
back then it was Twitter. And now it's just advanced to Discord, Substack. I'm sure I'm missing one, but there are so many avenues to get your voice out there, to publish, to just be a historian. And it's it's a lot of hard work from what I could tell,
Yes.
because I don't do it. I am not on, no longer on X. I don't have a Discord. I don't have a Substack. I don't have a podcast. I've been a guest on a couple of YouTube shows, but um, it's the field has changed to where it is a lot of like behind the scenes self branding, like creating, and you can speak to this so much more than I can. I am just here to like applaud what you are doing.
Right.
um, but if you want to like break out of these traditional norms, like a lot of that is it's creating these brands. It's doing the research, doing, you know, shaking hands, networking. When I would go to conferences, like I met someone after they had presented their speech and they had worked at a museum that I lived nearby. And I was like, I would love to intern for you at your museum next semester. And he's like, great, love to have you. And I got like experience working with oral history interviews through just like walking up to him and just like, hey, I really enjoyed what you had to say. I would love to like, you know, offer you some free labor in between classes. um, and yeah, I mean, networking is still shaking hands, kissing babies, getting to know who you need to know. But yeah, it's a lot.
It is.
And I'm still trying to figure it out. Like I know that we're most likely moving back to the States next year, and I'm already thinking about, okay, well, who do I know? Where are we going? How can I utilize what I'm doing now to try and get me a position, wherever we go next?
Definitely. And this actually kind of leads perfectly into the next big question, which is, of course, what I like to call the two paths: to be an historian and to be known as an historian. And in my opinion, to be an historian is an individual who's dedicated to, whatever their field of history is, where money's not really the big driving factor, but it's nice to get a little capital now and then. To be known as a historian is an individual dedicated to marketing either their dissertation, their research, something that they're really, really proud of, that they believe should be shared with the world. Now, both sides have their own hurdles. However, for first time historians who've told me this, from their experience, it's always the second part. To be known as a historian, that is the pathways a lot of people go on. And unfortunately, they burn out because the goals were a little too unrealistic and their passion for history kind of dies. Where it ultimately comes down to this: Just like in the publishing world, in the history field, there is no guarantee that your debut anything, whether it's your dissertation, presentation, something that you've worked on since all through college, is going to guarantee you the start of your legacy. It's not. Now, there are some exceptions, of course. There's a 50-50 chance that you could go to award-winning status and live off of that success to write more research, to be hired as a consultant or an advisor, depending on what it is. But on the other side of the coin, I should say, you have instances where historians fall, rise again, fall, and rinse and repeat. And ultimately, it's a very, very sad realization. So, Dr. Tamala, in your opinion, how important is it for first time historians to really understand this concept that there is no guarantee that their debut anything is going to guarantee them the start of their legacy, but it shouldn't deter them from studying and pursuing history if that is truly something they want to do with the rest of their lives?
Um, I mean, and this is something that has been on my mind since graduate school is, um, you know, if, and I would tell anybody thinking about going to get a graduate degree is if you are going solely for that purpose, because you're gonna get a graduate degree and you're gonna go and be a tenured track professor, you're going to be the next you know, multi-book, you know, historian, you know, go-to historian for, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my thought there, but like that you're going to be the person that like writes 10 books and they're all going to be great and you're going to be the go-to like history channel like consultant.
Right.
That's that's not why you should get your graduate degree.
No.
Because there are just shrinking opportunities with every year that passes. And um, I'll speak to this from like my personal experience.
Okay.
Is as I said, like I started freelancing in 2016, and as you know, with freelancing, you know, there's feast, there's famine, there's you know, oh, I'm gonna like, and so when I was like just purely freelancing, I was just like, oh, I'll do this, I won't do that. You know, you take on what you want to take on, and you know, or like thankfully like I usually had like a regular day job or something that was like paying my bills. But when I took on, oh, they're gonna pay me to write, like I have a legitimate big girl job where they pay me to write about travel, lifestyle, community news. Like I have a really cool fun job, but for 8 hours a day I am creative on demand.
Mm.
And a lot of people don't think about that. Like when you get into writing, when you get into like even being a professor, I didn't, I liked the class that I taught, but it was assigned to me. And I have like dabbled in being an adjunct professor. And I was like, oh, I want to teach like these, and these courses. And they're like, oh, no, no, no. Those are for like our full-time professors. You can have these classes that nobody else wants to teach. And so it's just, it's something to like keep in mind. Like when you think about being a historian, like even though I don't make money as a historian, I still consider myself a historian. I still consider
Right.
myself subject matter expert. I do try to keep up in my field, and that's one of the reasons that I do the kind of work that I do on the side is to stay relevant in my field, to like be in the discourse and be in the know. But like I had to accept early on that I may never make a dime as a historian. And to anybody watching or listening right now, it's okay to grieve that process. And I didn't realize like that's what I was doing when like I was just like, oh, this may never be a thing. I had to accept that. And I was sad. Like, I was super sad about it. I still get sad about it sometimes. Like I could, move to the next place and get a great historian job, but like that can no longer be the goal. Like, it's okay to have a day job.
Right.
Like it's okay to pay your bills doing something that, like, it wasn't your, full passion, but it allows you to travel, it allows you to pay your bills, it allows you to go out to dinner, a couple times a week. And I think people just kind of have to like divorce this idea of, I've got to do my passion for a living. And yeah, we all want to be the go-to. We all want to be that notorious historian. Like, we wouldn't have studied history if there weren't historians who came before us and inspired us. But not everybody, like, if you get like knowing that 300 people have downloaded my dissertation, like that means 300 people in like around the world have like sat, and I don't know if they read the whole thing, but like they took the time to download it. I do know one of my friends, because he reached out to me on LinkedIn. He's like, I stopped after the first chapter. This seems really great, but I'm not reading all 268 pages. And I'm like, I understand.
Right.
And I think that's just like, I celebrate those cool wins. Like when I get a notification that like somebody's downloaded a book review or downloaded my dissertation, or when I'm at work and like one of my stories like goes viral, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, people are reading what I wrote. And even if like one person reads what I wrote, like that's more than me.
Nice. And ultimately, just as authors and writers, historians, we get better as time goes on. We're always redeveloping our skill sets. We're always adding new skill sets to our roster of unique talents that we've earned over the years. And it's from those talents that grit will transform into talent. And it may be our 7th or 10th publication, whether it's, or not even just a publication, or maybe our 10th work that we have worked on, where that gets people's interests. And when that happens, now you can say, if you enjoyed this, check out my old research to see how far I've come. And ultimately, that'll be it.
This reminds me of oh my gosh, it's Ireland's ugly fairy tree.
Ooh.
Yes. So at my job, as I said, like we can kind of see what went viral, for the past week, or what was the most popular the day beforehand. And there is this article that predates like most of us who work in the office now. I think it's from like 2018. And we just always laugh because at least, oh my goodness, at least 5 or 6 times a month, something about Ireland's ugly fairy tree. I don't know if it's the SEO, if it's what people are Googling, but out of nowhere, this thing will just surge in popularity. And we don't know why. It's not like, I mean, I've read the article, obviously. It's a good article, but nobody can explain like what is so special about Ireland's ugly fairy tree that just makes it like go viral and just be popular. We don't go out of our way to promote it. Like, it's probably promoted on our socials once a year, if that. And it's just, so yeah, you can now call it like the Ireland fairy tree effect. Like, you never know what's going to be your fairy tree.
Right. That is very, very true. And we're now almost reaching the end of this incredible interview. So we'll now ask you, Tamala, the last 2 questions. So the first one's a really, really easy one. So besides, of course, friends and family, who else would you like to give a shout out to who have really been in your corner since day one of this journey of yours?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So aside from, I think I already like shouted out Dr. Ball, Dr. Denham. Um, there's just so many at USF, but let me see if I can like go, there's Dr. Fontaine, Dr. King, Dr. Butterbloom. Dr. Butterbloom was like my main advisor. So like without him, I wouldn't have a dissertation because like he very kindly took me on when I was just like, please, sir, like here's this 20-page paper that I would like to make 200. I just feel bad because I don't want to forget anybody. Dr. Irwin, Dr. Prince. They're actually both now at a university in Louisiana, and I want to say it's LSU, but I don't want to like say that for sure. So don't quote me on that one.
All right.
Like of course, as you said, like friends and family. I feel like I'm doing my like my dissertation thanks all over again. Like I wouldn't like I don't know, it's hard to say. Like my best friend, Kiri, she's over at USF finishing up her PhD. And like she was going to be the US historian to my European historian in our make-believe university that we have not yet gotten a chance to found. And what's funny now is she now studies early modern Europe. So yeah, she's just done more of a flip than I did. So yeah, to anybody that like, I feel like I should mention my husband, but that's awkward because he's like right in the other room. So like he can probably hear right now. Yeah, to anybody I didn't mention, like I know you exist. Thank you.
All right. And now the final question, Dr. Tamala, which is this. With everything you've learned and still learning about the industry, about being a historian and everything, what is your word of wisdom to fellow historians and first-time historians watching this video right now?
So you had talked about like being like working for the government and like being a government historian. Learn how to do a federal resume. They are completely different from the CVs that you're doing. They're completely different from 1 to 2 page resumes that you are used to doing. There is a formula. There are like, you've got to use certain keywords. You've got to use certain things from the actual job announcements. Like there are
Yeah.
entire classes you can take on like how to make your resume fit for a federal job. And a lot of like I didn't even like think to work for the federal government until I married my husband, and I was like, well, he works for the federal government. I should probably, that could be something I could do too. And I talk about like another moment where I applied for a museum technician job, and on paper, like I had everything they were looking for. And I just sent them like this regular 2 page, like, hey, this is why I should be your museum technician. Like I have experience working in museums and here's why I'm perfect. And my resume didn't even like make it past like the initial. And I was just like, I don't even know like why it didn't. And when I started like learning how to do a federal resume, I was like, oh, that's why, because I did nothing right. I did absolutely nothing on this resume right to get it past like that initial,
Right.
So, and there are like, as I said, a lot of people don't realize that there are a lot of, state jobs, federal jobs, city jobs that directly correlate to history. Like they do hire historians, they do hire museum technicians, they hire, but they also hire a lot of like things that want to utilize your skills.
Right.
And like, again, as I said, there's nothing wrong with paying your bills and being a historian on the side. Maybe I'm just like sensitive to that because that's what I do. But so yeah, that would be like my thing is just learn how to do a federal resume. If you're thinking about going to graduate school, like know that you can. I was recently rewatching Gilmore Girls, and Rory Gilmore, like when she like visits Yale or Harvard or one of the schools for the first time, she's like, "Wait, we read books And then we sit around and we talk about the books. And that was like graduate school. Like,
Mm-hmm.
read books, other people. It's an academic book club, and yeah, there's a lot of writing and a lot of research and all that. But at the end of the day, like, I was just in a really nerdy academic book club for 4 years, and it was awesome. So,
Nice.
like, yeah, if you are like on the fence or thinking about it, like, yeah, there's pros, there's cons. I almost quit my PhD several times. Like, I had to, like, people told me, like, don't do it. I had to, like, internally motivate, like, okay, we're gonna get through this. But yeah, if you're thinking about it, like, it's a really fun, nerdy book club where there's a lot of writing. um, so I hope I was able to like answer all of your questions. Like, I think, before you and I started the recording, I was like, I'm a little nervous because I don't actually like do history as a job like a lot of the people that you do talk to. So I was like, I don't know if I can help anybody, but I hope I can. I hope people derive some form of enjoyment out of watching this.
Oh no, definitely. You answered the question perfectly, and a perfect send off to this amazing historian's interview. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another historian's interview. A huge thank you to Dr. Tamala Malerk for coming on the show and making her debut appearance on the channel. Dr. Tamala, where can people find and engage with you on social media? And where can people find your reviews of the books that you have done reviews for?
So, this is going to sound so nerdy. The best place to connect with me is where Gabriel and I actually connected, is via LinkedIn. You can just like
Mm-hmm.
search my first and last name. I promise you, I'm probably the only Tamala Malerk that's going to pop up. You can try and find me on Instagram. I only have like 100 followers, and there is nothing academic there. But yeah, you can follow me at Instagram at Dr. Tamala. And the best place to read my book reviews, to see talks like this and other things that I've done, is to go to my website. Um, it's a WordPress website, and I should know the URL to it, and I don't. But what you can do is go to my LinkedIn or to my Instagram, and it is linked there. It says like, for my updated writings, click here. And every once in a while on LinkedIn, I get really lazy and I only update my website like every 3 to 6 months. I'm trying to get it down to a month, but like every 3 to 6 months, I will update my website, and I'll usually put a post out like, hey, finally updated my website. Click here. So yeah, I said the best way to connect with me, especially if you want to talk history or talk all things nerdy, is to just find me on LinkedIn.
I'll link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another historian's interview here on the channel. Again, a huge thank you to Dr. Tamala Malerk for making her debut appearance on the channel. And hopefully it won't be the last time we have her on the show. Who knows? She may be in a Historians Lounge special sometime later this year, or maybe she'll be the lineup for Historians Lounge season 3, which will begin next year. Who knows? Just stay up to date with my socials and her socials, and you just have to wait and see, as I said. And before we do go, make sure to pre-order Michael, Last Angel of Earth. It is still out for pre-order. Last 3 weeks. As well as if you want to join my ARC readers, applications are still open. I'll provide both links down below in the description of this video as well. And thank you all for the wishes and kind words. My voice is getting a little hoarse right now, but thank you all so very much for the support. It really means a lot to me. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And as always, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.